We've got a brand new Traxxas XRT on the bench, and today we're gonna show Traxxas what ultimate really means. But before we can do that, we gotta get this thing taken apart. Let's start by breaking down the modules. Over the course of this project, we're gonna have a ton of screws, and to keep organized, I'm gonna go ahead and use these little baggies, put the screws in, and then label them. This is a great time saver for when you put one of these projects back together. Now that's a great start, but when we get done with this thing, it's gonna be pretty unrecognizable. We're not gonna be putting a bunch of junk in here, just the best upgrades, everything you need to make this thing absolutely bulletproof. We might as well go ahead and get these electronics out of the way. None of this stuff is staying in here. Now for larger components, you can just go ahead and dump those in a bigger bag. You don't need to label it because it's very obvious what it is. Doing this may seem like quite a bit of hassle while you're taking things apart, but I assure you, you'll be happy you did it when it comes time to put it all back together again. And with that, we've gotten this thing broken down, which means we can start installing all of this. We've got awesome M2C parts like this chassis brace, servo brace, center drive shaft, steering, and a bunch of other stuff, including some bits and pieces from Amazon that I'm not even sure are gonna be any good. We're gonna have to find that out together. And these really beefy Mod 2 gears. Those should be interesting to see how loud they are. And to go along with that, we've got an MMX 8S, Hobbywing 1100 kV, Reef's Smart 900, and then we're gonna top it off with the biggest tires you can practically put on these trucks, Proline Trencher MX43s. And as icing on the cake, I've got a couple ideas for this truck that you may never have seen before, so make sure you stay tuned for that. So where do you wanna start? Front or back? Steering or motor? Steering? That's the one I wanted to do too. What a coincidence. This thing's so fresh, it's still got the packing material on it. As an alternative to bagging up the screws, you can just leave them in the parts. We've got a lot of upgrades we're going to be doing to these differentials, and we're going to be shimming them to make sure that these gears last as long as possible. I've got quite a few parts going in these differentials that I've never used before. They were very cheap on Amazon, and I'm really curious to see how they hold up. If you're following along at home, I'd recommend just getting the Traxxas aluminum differential housings. They're pretty much guaranteed to work, whereas with this, I'm not sure how well it's going to do. That seems to fit in there. Unlike with the Traxxas differential, you don't also need to get the different side gear plate kit. We're gonna fill this up with a little bit of 20K, comes with 10K stock, but I'm gonna be running bigger tires, so I'm gonna go a little bit thicker on the fluid. With aluminum housings, make sure you don't get fluid in these screw holes. If you do, it's going to interfere with the thread lock, and these screws will end up backing out on you. I've also got some Amazon special output cups. Again, if you're doing this build for yourself, I'd recommend either going with the Vitavon output cups or using the stock output cups and getting a set of sleeves from M2C. I don't know how well these are going to work, but we're going to find out. There we go, guys. One fully assembled, upgraded differential. Now, the reason for going aluminum on this, as well as going aluminum on the differential cover, is that aluminum helps hold this gear in place better than the plastic will, which can allow a little bit of flex under stress, which can break these gears. On principle, shimming a differential is very easy. Basically, all you need to do is make sure that this gear and this gear get as close together as possible without actually binding. A lot of people don't realize this, but the backlash tolerance on gears this small is only a few thousandths of an inch. That's smaller than the width of a human hair. For the purposes of bashing, all you need to do is just get them as close together as you can without being able to feel them bind. In this case, it's going to be kind of difficult to show you, but these gears are already pretty close together. They're almost at the point of binding, so I'm not going to add any shims to this. This differential cover is new Enron. Again, if you're going to be doing this, I'd recommend spending a little bit more money and getting a good name brand part. I've used Hot Racing before. Vitavon makes good ones as well. See if this even fits. Okay, yeah, it seems to fit pretty well. This differential is pretty tight, but these gears will wear in and this will loosen up. This isn't how I would ideally like it to be, but it should be just fine. Servo saver time. If you enjoy watching me tear apart brand new cars to do big upgrades on them, make sure you get subscribed. We do this kind of stuff here all the time. As you can see here, the M2C upgrade adds aluminum where you need it, but keeps plastic where you want it. You don't want everything to be stiff in a system like this because you need a little bit of flex, otherwise something's going to break in a crash. I'm definitely curious to see how these upgraded parts stand up to that Reef Smart 900. That's a pretty strong servo. As part of only upgrading what needs to be upgraded, I'm not going to be upgrading these steering links. These steering links are a cheap and easy to replace mechanical fuse, and they add some flex into the system, which I think is really important. However, we are going to be replacing all of these hinge pins with this GPM kit. They capture the arms on the top and bottom and really help strengthen things up. Upgrading sure is nice when the thing's brand new. Everything comes apart so easily. While I have these apart, I'm going to take this opportunity to install these Vidavon upgraded CVDs. These are really, really nice to have and a lot stronger than stock. So anytime you do a big upgrade, or even small upgrades sometimes, this is something you're going to run into, and that's aftermarket parts incompatibility. We've got Vidavon CVDs here with longer pins, and these no-name Amazon output cups, they don't fit together. So we've got a couple options here. We could go back to the stock CVDs, we could go back to the stock output cups, or fortunately in this case, I do have some Vidavon output cups that will work, so I'm gonna go ahead and use those. But this is something that you're gonna run into, because when aftermarket companies make parts, they make them compatible with the stock parts, and sometimes that means that two parts that were compatible with their respective stock parts won't be compatible with each other. These GPM capture pins come with O-rings and washers. I found without using them, you get full engagement on the lock nut, and I haven't really seen any reason to use them either. You'll need to enlarge the holes in the ends of these arms a little bit, just so the pin can go all the way through. The drill bit is included. I think these through bolts are a required upgrade. Not only do they stop the arms from spreading, but they also capture the upper bulkhead, which helps prevent it from breaking in crashes. Another really great upgrade that reinforces this front end is replacing this plastic bottom plate with an aluminum one. Another thing I won't be upgrading are these hubs and knuckles. These XRT redesigned ones work really, really well, and I just don't think it's worth the weight and cost to upgrade them. However, we are going to be upgrading these shocks with Traxxas shock caps, M2C pistons, and this awesome M2C lower kit with much thicker shafts and lower mounts. I've got a full tutorial on how to do this job in my Outcast 8S upgrade video. Make sure you check that out for all the details. Now here's a tip for saving money. Don't throw away your stock shock oil, especially if it's brand new, even if you do want to increase the weight. Instead, pour it in a bottle to save it, and then if you want to thicken it up, this stock oil is 30 weight. I want to end up at about 60 weight, so I'm going to add 1000 CST, which is about 90 weight, in equal parts. Now this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, this is just a basher, not a razor, so around the correct thickness is fine. An interesting side note, you'll often see two different specifications on your oil, a weight and a CST. CST is a standard for measuring the viscosity of fluids, weight is not. So the relationship between these two numbers are going to be different depending on what manufacturer of oil you're getting. The CSTs should be consistent though. Like I said, if you want to see the full assembly instructions for one of these, make sure you check out my Outcast 8S build video, but just look at the difference in size on these shock shafts. That's some serious gains. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, we'll just fill her up with some homemade 60 weight. And here's another problem you're likely to run into when doing upgrades. Buying the wrong parts. These are Max shock caps. Fortunately, I've got a Max. For now, we'll just put the stock shock caps back on. I'll get some on order. I'm really excited to see how these are going to perform. Let's get them installed. Another really common thing you run into is installing things incorrectly. As you can see, just to show you an example, I went ahead and installed this upside down. I would never do this on accident. And with that, the front end is done. I would say she's looking really good. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the rear. And now that that's done, let's go ahead and get this motor replaced. And to do that, we're gonna use this 1100 kV Hobbywing motor, this M2C mount with precision adjustment, and these Mod 2 gears. I've never used these before. I'm really excited to see how they work. This motor is one of those big ticket items you can resale to recoup some of your upgrade cost. This thing's worth a pretty penny. Now, I'm not meaning to fanboy, but the stuff M2C makes really is a work of art. Let's get these crazy Mod 2 gears on. Look at how much bigger those teeth are. Mod 1.5 gears can be loud. I'm really curious to see just how loud these are. We're gonna be finding out soon. I have to say, I'm not super thrilled with these teeny tiny set screws on this giant gear. We'll have to see how it holds up though. This gear also comes with opposing set screws. I'd recommend only using the one that's on the flat. If you use two 180-degree opposing set screws on a gear, basically all you're doing is just bearing on those two set screws. That's not the right way to do it. You really need to have one set screw pushing against the shaft, which then makes the entire other side of the shaft bear against the gear. We're going with an aluminum spur shaft cover because that really strengthens up this area and helps prevent misalignment of your gears. I was a little bit confused about how this mesh adjustment system worked at first, but it's actually really ingenious. You just slide this ball into the notch on the top of the mount, and then you adjust the grub screw to lift the motor and motor mount up to the perfect adjustment, and then you just tighten up your screws. And when you're done, just loosen up the grub screw, take the adjuster out, and it's not in your way. It's a really, really elegant design. Smooth. And with that, the rear module is done, and I think it looks absolutely awesome. What do you think? And now I've gone ahead and installed the electronics, including this fan mount for the MMX 8S and this Reef Smart 900 with M2C adapter plate. I did have to do some slight modification to this adapter plate, and I had to do a little bit of modification to the chassis. And with that, it's time for final assembly. And the front end. Even though it's a shame to cover up this beautiful center drive shaft, we just need to put the skid and the bumpers on, and we're gonna be ready to take this thing for a rip. Oh man, I almost forgot the best part. Now she's ready to bash. All right, let's see how fast this thing is. I expect the tires to be the limiting factor, but it should be pretty quick. Yeah, front tires are ballooning quite a bit. Woo! One more pass. She's pretty stable. All right, guys, 50 miles an hour. That is not too bad for what this truck is. Let's do some bashing. Told you that pinion wasn't gonna stay on. Unfortunately, bashing cut short. This little tiny grub screw is just not enough to hold on this big pinion gear, and it kept falling off. I don't have another one, so that's as far as we're going for today. Now, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me do a few more updates to this. I'd like to try and maybe replace this wing with a bumper, obviously put a better pinion and spur on here, and I need to install an external BEC, because even this MMX 8S isn't strong enough to keep up with that Reese Raw 900, and it was starting to cut out on me as well. If you'd like to see another video with all of that, let me know down in the comments, and while you're waiting for that, why don't you check out one of these videos.